Hey, Horror Movie Night. Welcome to another bonus episode of the podcast. This week, we are talking about Rust Belt Driller, which is going to be premiering Saturday night at the Buffalo Film Festival. So I wanted to bring on some of the creative minds that brought this film to us. Real quick, so the audience can get used to your voices, can you quickly introduce yourself and what you did on the film?
This is David Williams. Producer, executive producer, co-director, and everything else. So whatever needed to be done, if I could help do it, I did.
I'm Tilke Hill, and I am co-director with Dave, and I also was the intimacy coordinator officially. But like Dave said, we all did lots of stuff. Like one time I got to hold a head while we drilled a brain, and I had to make some cool skin wounds and build a set. So, Jills and Jacks of all trades.
Aaron Krygier, writer, lead actor in Ren, film editor, producer, executive producer with Dave. A lot.
So this movie, I'm going to address the audience listening right now. I know that our show covers a variety of different things, but if you're one of those people who's really into that 70s exploitation mixed with just a dash of schlock, this is the movie for you. This is kind of a modern day, not that it has that much in common, but it feels very like modern day Bucket of Blood to me at times. But just like if Trauma did Bucket of Blood, like just as much gore as you can splatter onto the screen, but also real trippy, real heady, a lot of like what is real, what is fantasy. It's an exciting, different type of movie. And I'm really excited that I got a chance to watch it, and I'm excited to hear how audiences react to it on Saturday. But can you tell me a little bit about some of the influences that you pulled from to come up with this? I mean, obviously, Aaron, we'll start with you because you wrote it, but then I'd love to hear from a directorial side a little bit of the visual interpretation.
Yeah, sure. So I think it was March or April, Dave and I were talking, as we have. I've known Dave and Tilke both for years and years and years and years and years. So, we were just kind of talking about projects or upcoming projects or just thoughts. And Driller Killer by Abel Ferraro was on Prime. And we started talking about that, and then reading about that a little more, we found that technically Driller Killer is in the public domain. The copyright was never renewed. So we had talked about potentially kind of redoing that for the 21st century, and everything with COVID and just the political climate and just all the craziness that's going on now. And then Dave said, why don't you take it in a little bit more of a unique direction? So that's where I took the script, drew a lot from my own personal internal struggles with a lot of things. But that's kind of how it came about. We have influences there. The Videodrome is a massive influence. Perfect Blue, the anime. There's even Blade Runner in there. There's so many different ones. There's the list that I came up with to recommend for people to watch was about 10 strong, I think. We pulled from everything. And in the end, we ended up really gravitated towards that late 70s, early 80s, grimy, grindy kind of horror. It's funny, there was one day we kind of shot some things with a certain sequence, and I said to our director of cinematography, Bill Schweikert, I said, wow, this day ended up being a complete Brian De Palma day, and we didn't even realize it at first. So, we had a lot of stuff like, Dress to Kill and all that kind of stuff. So that's where a lot of our influence came, but even stuff like Session 9 for tone, Lost Highway for tone, all that kind of stuff too. Definitely a lot of different things.
For sure. And then the visual style of this film is so unique and different. And also the audio. That really jumped out at me is the way that you play with audio volumes through certain scenes. Just a really interesting film. What was it like from the director side of stuff? Like Aaron delivers you this wild script, and then you have to create a whole vision of of this weird story.
Well, Aaron and I think we share the same love for the same sort of movies, the kind of, everything from that kind of late 70s or early 80s New York City, 42nd Street, grimy, gritty, grindhouse, sexploitation, or exploitation. I know we're also attracted to films like Lars Van Trier. Yeah.
Trier.
We only people laughing at a lot of the house that Jack built.
Yeah. The house that Jack built, I think we laughed through most of that because it was so ridiculous and so absurd and so blackly humored. And I think that's another thing. We both have kind of a sick sense of humor that we can look at things that most people are like, oh my God, that's just awful. And we're just on the floor. We're just thinking it's just so off the wall and ridiculous. It's just funny. And so I come out of that, but I also come out of like, I guess the 60s, 70s art house, European cinema. So people like Bergman and Fellini and Antonioni, and so that kind of that old art house aesthetic. And I think a friend of mine once said something to the effect that I make B horror movies with art house pretensions, and so that kind of describes my whole visual style. Where what if Godard made a slasher film? What would that look like? What would that sound like? What would that be like?
And how about Tilke? How like what was your, like, when you were looking at this and trying to come up with a visual style for the stuff from your side of the co-director seat?
I think that for me, like, reading the script, and also I have a dark sense of humor like Aaron and Dave, but I think that their sense of humor is much maybe much over the line. But I definitely think things that aren't supposed to be funny are funny. So, we're simpatico along those lines. So when I read the script, I was like, this is bonkers. Like, for me, I'm really like, I can see the colors and I can see what the actors are doing, and I can see, what's happening, like the story in my mind in that kind of way. Not necessarily saying like, oh, I'm going to make it like this. I see this film. Yes, I can see the influences of all the films, and, watching all of, where Aaron was coming from when he was writing it, of course, was super useful. But it's interesting. Dave made this comment in another interview. He was saying that you would be hard pressed because we split up a lot of the filming, which allowed us to shoot this film in a very short period of time. Like, I took a B team and went and shot a bunch of stuff, and you'd be hard pressed to say like, oh, Tilke shot that or Dave shot that. Dave did take more of the gore shoots because, that's his thing. And as I've said on other interviews, I don't like gore.
I have to say, one of the other things that really popped out about this movie is, obviously the movie is called The Rust Belt Driller. You look at the poster, it's very clear the 70s exploitation influences right out the gate. You mentioned Driller Killer, and it's definitely up there just in a poster sense of like, Driller Killer had that can't miss poster of just a guy getting a drill through the head. But
I wonder what that movie is about.
but you kind of expect with movies that have those influences that they're going to do like the saturate the film and make it look like it's this lost relic from this time period, and everything's going to be dark and shadowy. But this, I actually was really blown away that the color palette is so vivid and so much of it pops. There is a legitimate visual style in everything that's happening in this movie, which was there even a moment where you were like, hey, we should saturate this and make it look 70s? Or, you'd said, Aaron, we're trying to do this for 2021. So I guess that was out the gate. You're like, we're not trying to make this look like it was from the 70s. We're just bringing that attitude into the new generation.
So and I'm glad that I'm glad you noticed that. So Steve Rosenthal, who was our sound capture, is also a very talented editor, and he did all our color correction. Where I sat down with him quite a bit, and on some things he just kind of took off. But as I was writing the film, everybody writes differently, obviously, but as I've evolved a little bit as a writer and as a person, I try to look at script writing or prose or whatever, at different levels. And red and yellow and purple were the consistent thematic colors that just kind of came to me. When I write, I'm either listening to music like, Max Richter and kind of like ethereal and, like electronic, or I'll even put on movies in the background that I know very well that have a similar tone. So like writing this and having Videodrome on just in the background, just for inspiration. But the color palette came to me very, very quickly. It was red and it was yellow and it was purple. And we reflected that quite a bit, obviously in the color correction too, but also in Ren's outfit and as the story progresses and all that kind of thing. Red, obviously, with being the blood, but yellow and purple just kind of came together, and Steve really ran with that. And I think it's very bold in that sense, and I think I'm glad you mentioned it because I think it works really, really well.
No, it makes everything pop, and it's there's going to be plenty of stuff that people walk away from this movie that they're going to remember. It's definitely not a movie that you watch and just readily forget. But I think those color choices are going to be those things that 15 years from now, if they've only seen it this one night at the Buffalo Film Festival, they're going to be like, what was that movie where it was like the bright purples? And like I think that is going to be the thing that sticks in people's minds, as well as seeing people get destroyed by this gigantic drill. So as we're winding down, I know the film festival's kicking off tonight, and I want you all to be able to go and enjoy the opening ceremonies. But I just want to know, if you could only have one horror movie that really is like your go-to as we're in October, what is your like horror film must watch in your life?
My favorite is 28 Days Later, and I don't even know if you'd call that a horror film, but I think it is. Sort of, it's to me kicked off the obsession with zombies. So that's always like to me that's my favorite, that I always like, that for me, I remember everything. I remember where I was in the theater when I saw it, and how I felt and all of that stuff.
That's a good choice, actually.
Yeah,
that's a good film.
Good movie.
The original Suspiria. Speaking about
it's big color palette. Yeah.
Speaking of an extreme color palette that pops. I think I've watched it almost every year since it came out, which shows you how old I am and how obsessed I am with that film. So it's just fantastic. And the remake we will not speak of because people should die.
I remember my brother wanted to watch the original Suspiria, and I before I sat him down, I was just like, this movie probably won't make a ton of sense on your first view, but it's going to be beautiful, so just enjoy it.
Well, it's that kind of that dream logic, that kind of nightmare logic, where, if you really sit back and think about it, you're thinking, how did that happen? Or how did she get from that room? And didn't she go through a window and she fell into a room full of wire? And why is there a room full of wire? And, but in the reality of that movie, it's like, that makes perfectly good sense.
I feel like there's a lot of Suspiria. Honestly, as you were talking about, there's a lot of Suspiria and Rust Belt Driller in that sense.
There's a touch, no doubt.
Yeah, well, we're big fans of all that too. I mean, Suspiria Phenomena for me is always
that's such a good one.
It's so good, and of course, it inspired Clock Tower, the old PlayStation game with the Scissor Man and all that kind of stuff. It's such an unfair question to say just the one, especially because horror has such a built-in community and there's so many subgenres. But I always have to go back to Alien, the original Alien. It's a perfect movie. There's no flaws in the original Alien.
For sure.
And it's I can watch that any day, anytime, all that kind of thing. When people ask what my comfort movie is, I tell people Seven. They and some people laugh, and the others don't talk to me anymore. Which I don't even know if it's necessarily a horror movie, but it's got those tropes. Obviously, I mean, there's so many great things, and that's why Dave and I over the years have gravitated to horror so much. There's just so many opportunities and there's so many different ways to express it. In a lot of ways, especially with culture changing, I think horror is one of the last real bastions, if you want to call it, freedom too, where, I mean, obviously apart from being blatantly repugnant and offensive, you can still do pretty much anything you want with horror, and someone will watch it and someone will still be a part of it and be into it. So, I think that's important, especially for this movie and other movies just like it. And, with those great auteurs, Carpenter and, Cronenberg and all the other ones that we've talked about, Argento, obviously. So I think that's all right. Yeah.
Well, the film is screening at 9:45 at the Buffalo Film Festival, buffalofilm.org. That is going to be October 9th if you're in the future listening to this. But if people aren't in the Buffalo area, maybe they missed out on the screening. Are there any other screenings on the horizon? And if not, where can they go to find out about future screenings and their ability to see the movie?
They can actually go and watch it online through the Buffalo International Film Festival if they can't make it to the screening. So
awesome.
It's playing online at the festival.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you so much, all three of you. Guys, go and hit up buffalofilm.org, October 9th, 9:45. You heard, you don't even have to be there in person if you're living in Arizona or California.
If you live in Buffalo, come and see us in person. But if you don't...
But yeah, it'll be available. John Fink told me that it'll be available from 9 p.m. on October 9th if you're watching it digitally, and you have up to like 4 days to view it from getting that admission. So yeah, if you're not with us, please check it out. If you are, then come.
Yeah, you got no excuse if you're living in Buffalo. Get over there.
Right.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.